So we have a fellow leggy on as a guest today. He's played for his country in all three formats all over the world, and at one point was ranked the #1 bowler in the world in T20 international cricket. This of course meant that he was also on the T20 franchise circuit. I think we first got chatting on social media the day after his 6 for 11 for Adelaide Strikers in the Big Bash. I think it's always interesting to hear Ish speak about bowling, and his thoughtfulness about the art is clear. For example, if you watch his online TED Talk. Ish has played for Rajasthan in the IPL, working with Shane Warne, and this year was set to take on a different role as spin consultant and operations executive for the Royals. Welcome to the Spin Badger podcast, Ish Sodhi.
Yeah, thanks, Boise. It's great to be here, mate. It's great to be with a fellow leggy. Talk some badgering about leg spin.
No, thanks, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. So I guess starting at the beginning, like how did you get into bowling spin?
Mate, it was a pretty interesting journey for me. I think, like most young cricketers, I probably came into cricket as a batsman, and I'm generally a lot taller than most of my peers, especially growing up, and I always tried to bowl fast because I wanted to be this big nasty fasty, and from the age of about 9 to 12, I was a fast bowler. Probably more of a batsman, but it wasn't until I was 12 years old and I was introduced to Deepak Patel, who obviously in New Zealand's held in really high regard for what he did in the 1992 World Cup. And he was a spin bowler, and we had a cricket academy that I was fortunate to be invited to. And he just asked the floor, he said, "Who bowls spin here?" And I guess just in a bid to impress him, I put my hand up, and I'd never bowled spin before. But he put me into a side net by myself because there were no spinners there, and I decided to bowl a ball in my head that I thought was a spin delivery, and it turned out to be a leggy. So that's where it started for me.
Nice. And then I guess as you got slightly older from there, what was your journey like into the professional game?
Well, once I started bowling leg spin at that age of probably about 12, I've grown up in a technological era. I kind of noticed that leg spin was something that was pretty cool. I'd never seen it before until I'd done it, and I decided to explore it a little bit further. So I started going on YouTube, and I remember like really early on just typing in leg spin on YouTube, and then I was introduced to this guy called Shane Warne.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, mate, being 12, 13 years old and discovering this amazing art that, you just tried to play around with something in the nets and you found it. And then getting to watch Shane Warne on all these old videos and seeing what he had done on the international circuit. And he was still playing a lot of cricket at that time, so I started following him quite closely. And then, I kept bowling a lot in the nets. And after a fair bit more research, I found Anil Kumble, who, was a similar sort of build to what I was, tall, pretty strong, lanky, kind of build, and he used to bustle in and try to bowl faster than Shane Warne. So that was my first kind of introduction. And then moving on, I started, I guess, getting a lot of wickets at age group level, getting picked in district sides, and then obviously found club cricket, Premier Club cricket, and from there put some performances up to get into the Auckland A side, and eventually started playing professional cricket for Northern Districts.
Nice. And I think that's a great point what you're saying about YouTube. Like, first of all, on Warne, I think it's be really easy to underestimate the effect he had probably on most leg spinners like a similar age to us or a bit younger, who grew up watching him. And I guess he just showed the way that, you can have a really successful career doing it. And I also, the point about Kumble spot on is I always encourage young spinners that I talk to or work with, that finding bowlers who are similar to how you go about it is something that can be really helpful. So do you think like watching Kumble and I guess not so much modelling yourself, but seeing how he went about it, was that something that was really helpful?
Yeah, I guess, most of the kids my age or most of my peers were, a little bit shorter, and I was always a little bit taller than most people. And I always used to get that criticism, like, "Oh, why don't you bowl fast? You're so big and you're so tall and stuff." But I was so passionate about leg spin. So seeing a guy that was, a lot taller than his teammates and, big and strong, and not just like, shorter and I guess wider and stockier like Warnie was, it was just great reinforcement to me that, all body shapes and sizes can, be able to bowl spin. I guess you look around the world now, you see a lot of spin bowlers, and guys even in New Zealand, guys like Mark Craig, Mitchell Satner. I think of even Shahid Afridi, like they're all quite tall bowlers, and so there's definitely a place for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the great things about spin compared to a lot of, well, just compared to fast bowling is, there's lots of different ways to do it, and doesn't matter if you're shorter, maybe on the shorter side like me, maybe, or like, someone
All
like,
about like Parky.
yeah, well, you said it, not me, mate. Or like, as an extreme, I guess like Solomon Ben, there's lots of different body shapes and stuff, of people who can bowl spin. So, um, you mentioned like coming through club cricket in New Zealand. Like, what was that like? Because I think the perception from the rest of the world is that conditions in New Zealand maybe don't suit spin bowling that much. So, what was it like, kind of fighting your way through club cricket to get in the Auckland A side?
Yeah, I guess most of the club wickets that I've played on probably were more conducive to seam bowling. And so, you had to find a way to be successful. And I suppose as a leg spinner, you always aspire to put as many revs on the ball as possible. And I suppose if you have to work for it, it only makes you put more on the ball. And I guess from a young age, I was quite fortunate that I, had a lot of conditions that, you know, made me work for turn. So I had to learn how to bowl like overspin, which generally spins in this part of the world. Into the deck a lot more. That's probably a little bit more technical terminology, but I always kind of learned to bowl into the deck. It's definitely something that I've tried to continue doing over my career. So from a young age, I think those tough club wickets to bowl spin, I think definitely can hold you in good stead, because like you would know, as you progress to higher levels of cricket, first class international cricket, you can't just get away with looping the ball up and trying to spin it. You have to bowl hard, heavy deliveries, and I think sometimes if the wicket is turning, you can almost get a little bit complacent with that. And if you tend to push the ball a little bit more, it might spin. So yeah, definitely in this part of the world, you have to work for your turn, and I think that makes you, in the long run, a better bowler.
Definitely, I think I was out in Christchurch playing this winter for Burnside, one of your other clubs this year, and I think you played for the Boomers, is it, or the Social Ghetto Hustlers, whatever they're called. Uh,
Yeah, no, mate, I've played for Burnside. Yep.
but yeah, like I think my perception going over there was that it's going to be dominated by seam, and I think like in general that's definitely the case. But at Burnside, we had three spinners, and I think especially in the T20 competition, like kind of built our side around that, and it definitely is, offers a bit more spin than you'd expect. Like we had one left arm spinner who's probably like the best non-professional spinner I've played with, like, and he was outstanding because, like you said, he made the most conditions. He was extremely accurate, changed his pace really well. So I think that's a great point, that even if the wicket doesn't suit you that much, it's just about finding a way for that surface, really.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson in itself, probably to yourself and me. From still being reasonably young spinners. It can so often be the case that you get provided with a wicket that's not turning too much, or it's more conducive to seam bowling, and the captain probably trusts his seamers a little bit more. But finding a way, like I listened to this podcast the other day about Warne, and Warne was saying how he gets pretty frustrated when people say, "Oh, it just wasn't my day today," or "the conditions just weren't in my favor." And I heard that, and I was like, how many times in my career have I fell into that trap? I probably have fell into that trap quite a few times, and more times than I would have liked. But if I'd gone back to basics and thought, okay, these conditions aren't in my favor, what's in my control, and how am I going to be competitive? I think it's so important to learn for any spinner, especially because if you're a leg spinner in countries like New Zealand and England, conditions most of the time aren't going to be in your favor. So if you can learn, to bowl in those conditions, then bowling in spinning conditions will be a whole lot easier.
No, it's funny you say that because I listened to the exact same podcast. Was it the Shane Watson one? Yeah, like,
Yeah,
and
how good was it?
yeah, like such great insight. I'd recommend that podcast to anyone who like is interested in spin bowling. To learn from Warren, and I think that is so true. Like, even if you have a day mentally where you just feel, oh, it's not quite coming out right today, like I think the best spinners and cricketers, I guess, they just find a way to battle through and get through it rather than thinking, it's not my day today, and just move on to the next. I thought it was really pertinent. So, going to jump a bit all over the place here. You brought up Shane Warne twice now about watching him on YouTube and watching him play when you're younger, and then also about listening to him on that podcast. So, what was it like? I think it was last season, maybe. Working with him at Rajasthan in the IPL. What was his input like with you?
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw that Shane Warne was the ambassador for the Rajasthan Royals, and I went over there and I had all these ideas about questions that I wanted to ask him. Obviously being a Badger like yourself, if you get the chance to mingle with your heroes, guys that inspired you to take up leg spin bowling, you expect so much out of them. But I guess the great thing that I found with Warnie and my rubbing shoulders with Warnie were how simple he really kept his bowling and how tactical his bowling was. I think in this day and age, with all this high performance and all these analysis and all this video footage that you have of yourself, I think it's so easy to get caught in a technical trap. And I think, at times in my career, I've done that as well. So the great thing was just going, reconnecting with this guy who, was all about getting you out. And he was all about, being in the battle and being competitive and keeping things really, really simple. So that was great. I think he had a tremendous cricketing brain to be able to pick it. And I guess the other part of it was just feeling like a kid again, like, hanging out with Shane Warne. I got to face him in the nets, which was bizarre, having one of your heroes run in and bowl at you. And the whole time I was in his ear, I was like, come on, Warnie, get your flipper out. Come on, get your flipper out. I've got to see it. He's like, oh, come on, mate. I've got to warm up. Like, the body's not what it used to be. And sure enough, he was like, right. So after about 10, 15 minutes, he came in and bowled this flipper. I knew it was coming, so I crunched it through the covers. But yeah, it landed really well. And it was like it would have been just mucking around for him. And it was a little bit of mucking around for me as well. But, I'll definitely store that memory for a really long time to come. The amount of times I watched his flipper on TV, to watch it with my own eyes coming down on me was definitely something I'll treasure for a really long time.
That's class. Have you got a flipper, Ish?
Mate, I've been working on a flipper, but I don't think it's great for my shoulder, eh?
Yeah.
The more that I try to bowl it, I feel like I'm jarring my shoulder so much. And I worked a lot with Stuart McGill in the past, and he said, mate, just think about it. It's like a ball that your weight's moving forward, but your shoulder's moving backwards. So I'm sure he's probably told you the same thing if you worked with him in the past. But man, it'd be good to get one out. It'd be so good to get one out. See a batsman go back for a pull shot or a cut. Oof.
Yeah, I think like you watch like the compilation videos of Warne like cleaning up people with flippers, and you just think that is amazing. But then like say for me, like I'm not really playing much cricket at the moment. I'm thinking, right, instead of like just bowling for the sake of it, like I've been working on my flipper for like, I don't know, 5 years maybe. Like whenever you get time to muck around trying to bowl it, and it's so hard to master. Like, but it's just for me that's like a little project. I guess has been for a while, and definitely at the moment. So I think that, or when we are back bowling, so. Yeah, I think if you can get it, I really think that the world's your oyster if you can land a good flipper that behaves exactly how you want. But I guess that's not the easiest thing to do. But that's I guess why.
Yeah, but your bowling action would be quite good for a flipper, I reckon, especially with those Duke balls. Like if you get it right, it could sometimes swing in. Have you seen that?
100%. Like I think, and that's the thing that I guess keeps me coming back to it is like, say if you get 1 in 4 good, you're like, oh my god, and then you bowl like a couple more that bounce twice, and you're just like Jesus. But like even in New Zealand this winter, I was like, right, I'm just forcing myself to bowl it in games, but it takes some nuts because you just know you can get it so wrong. But I guess the reward's so great.
I felt, I know. Like especially if you bowl it to a lower order batsman, and you surprise them, it catches pace so much. But I found that the easiest way for me to bowl it and have more control was to bowl it with a scrambled seam.
Really? I never thought about that.
Personally, yeah. So instead of how there's that 2-finger grip and you try to click it.
Yeah.
I almost have I don't know if you've seen Imran Tahir bowl, a huge amount, but his grip with those 3 fingers together and the index finger by itself and thumb just resting, like I kind of put those 3 fingers on the back of the seam and almost rotate it that way. And I find it way easier to control. Might be worth giving a crack. I don't know.
It's me going to the nets after this then, Ish.
Yeah, no, I'm almost tempted to go get a ball and try to show you the grip, mate.
Yeah. So like continuing with Warne, really, like I think that's amazing. You know, I said that time he gave to you, and you said about, you know, that's almost like, you know, playing with you, like mucking around the nets with heroes, like being a real highlight for you. Like I think that's something that definitely resonates with me. I think it was the 2015 Ashes. I got to spend a couple of hours with him, and like I think whatever happens in my career, like, you know, go on, play for England or whatever I do, like that will always be a highlight to have those couple of hours picking his brains and just talking to him. Like he was so generous with his time, and I guess that's probably a big motivator for doing stuff like this as well. Like, you know, you can really share some of the conversations that you have, and the big thing, like you said, is very tactical. Like, and this is a bit of a cliche when you talk about Warne, but he spoke a lot about starting out with your sweepers out and that kind of thing, and then get into your spell, and then you can bring your fielders up as you go. And I think that's, for any young spinner listening, that's really good advice, because if you start with an over-attacking field and you hit for a couple of boundaries, you know, you're putting a fielder out and you're there on the back foot. Whereas if you start with them out and then settle in and bring them up, you know, you've got the upper hand there. So it's something simple, but I think it's like really effective. And he says it a lot, but I just think it was one of my big takeaways from the time I spent with him.
Yeah, you know, I think that's another great lesson for a lot of kids and probably a lot of coaches and captains around there as well. Like, you know, for example, in New Zealand, I know we spoke earlier about conditions and how sometimes they're not in your favour. I kind of had this period in my career where I was bowling with this fielder on the boundary, you know, quite far behind leg side, and he never got hit. You know, if I dropped short, I was getting pulled quite far in front of square. You know, I always felt like I had a huge amount of control on my line. But my length sometimes, you know, as a leg spinner, especially a young leg spinner, was a lot harder to control. So what I found, you know, on those green wickets, I started really targeting the stumps and targeting the front pad. And that meant I could have one less fielder on the offside, bring him across the leg side, get a 45 in, which means if I get two straight, they're not getting one, it's always a dot. And that afforded me to have my sweeper a lot more in front of square. And I guess I had the backing of my captain, I had the backing of my coaches. You know, I was starting to, you know, become a far better red ball bowler at that stage. So, you know, it took time to, you know, gain that trust of my teammates and stuff to be able to get the fields that I wanted. But once I controlled my line and I didn't need that extra guy on the offside, I felt like the stumps were always in play. So if it wasn't turning, I could bowl as straight as I wanted, and if they wanted to sweep and sweep hard, the guy was always in front of square, so they'd only get one. And if they wanted to sweep behind, well, their head had to be a little bit far back, so you know, the chance for LBW was far greater. Guys were trying to play a lot squarer than what they had to. So I kind of used that defensive field in an attacking manner, which really worked well for me. But I think for most young spinners in this day and age, because, you know, the game's being played a lot faster than what it used to be played. You know, even in Warnie's era, you know, I'd say the economy rates of or run rates in Test matches have probably gone up by a run, if not more per over per day. So yeah, I think spin bowling's become that sort of game. You got to try to stay in the attack as long as you possibly can, and once you get the gain of your captain and your coaches, I'm sure you're the same. You know, you just have so much more confidence as a bowler to perform your skill.
Definitely. I think that point about having your sweeper out in front of square, like that sounds very similar to me in red ball. Like, I know where I get hit, probably bowl a similar line to what you're saying. So I think working out like your areas where you want to defend, like I said, for me in the first innings from getting a lot of drift, I know it's harder to hit for the offside, so you can, even if it's unorthodox, just working out like where you're going to get hit. Like, I think that's something that
especially for you, because I do remember us speaking about your bowling, and one of your biggest strengths is your drift. And you know, so if my biggest, you know, I absolutely hate this when I bowl like a really good wrong-in, or like the ball drifts onto the stumps and they go forward for a defensive shot, get an inside edge, and it goes to 45 for one. Like, it's horrible, you know. Like, and generally those are the kind of lines and the way the wicket behaves on day 1 and 2 most of the time. You know, the inside edge is more in play than the outside edge, so it just makes sense to have that 45 there if you're really, like, you know, in control of your line. And if you do that, man, the game becomes so simple.
Definitely, like even in first innings red ball, I'll have that guy like leg slip quite a bit, because whether he gets that many catches or not, like he's still going to stop it. And the one thing about bringing fielders in, you've got that bit more attacking presence, I get. So, I spoke a lot about Warne there, but someone who has had like an absolutely massive impact on me and Parky, and I know you've worked with him as well, is Stewie McGill. Like, how did, for anyone listening, like, he's obviously played at the same time as Warne, but his coaching is like outstanding, like his knowledge and the way he thinks about the game and how he goes about it. But how did it come about working with him, and what's your relationship like with Stu?
Yeah, well, it started when I went over to play. I think it was 3 games for the Adelaide Strikers. It must have been in 2017. And Dizzy Gillespie was the coach of my Adelaide Strikers team, and he was a really good mate of Stuart McGill's. And one day he came to me and said, "Oh, Ish, I'm going to catch up with Stewie for lunch. I know you're a bit of a badger because, me and him already had a couple of stats, quizzes and stuff." And
Yeah.
so he's like, "Yeah, would you like to come?" And I was like, "Mate, I would love to come and meet Stuart McGill and chew his ear off about leg spin over lunch." And so I did. Went over there for the first 10, 15 minutes. It was me like a little bit fanboyish, being real surface and talking about, his experiences in the past and stuff. And then by the end of it, hour and a half after that, it was like we were best mates. And we talked about leg spin in detail. We talked about our experiences, off the park, and instantly hit it off. And that night I went away. He gave me one piece of advice, and that was just to make sure I was driving my back hip through towards the target and not around myself. I think he's always been big on that. Every time we've had a chat, every time we've been fortunate to have the time together. And I focused really hard on that. And that night I went really well. I got 6 wickets in that game. So I don't know whether it was because I was really excited of meeting Stu McGill, or I had the right things working for me from my action point of view. But it was just ironic that I did quite well on that day, and I kept in touch with Stu McGill. But yeah, look, that era, their knowledge is just amazing. Like 2 world-class leg spinners playing in the same country, and I've got no doubt if he wasn't competing with Shane Warne, he'd be the guy to have 500, 600, 700 test wickets as well. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, it's a great relationship that I have with Stewie. And yeah, he's just a great coach and great guy to bounce ideas off.
Definitely, completely agree with that. And then what about like other coaches who have had a big influence on you? Like, I don't know if he's necessarily had a big influence on you, but someone that we've both worked with as well is Sairaj at Rajasthan. Like, did you do a lot of work with him? Like, is there any other people who you'd consider to be like really big influences on you?
I think like you said, really fortunate to work with all these incredible leg spinners. Sairaj has 600, 700 first class wickets in India, and didn't play for India as much as you probably expect with the record that he had. But yeah, just so lucky to be exposed to all these guys and all this knowledge. But like the trend that kind of seems to follow is like the guys that are real good blokes and easy to talk to and happy to pass on information, I seem to resonate with really well. And Sairaj is one of those guys. I spent 2 years alongside him. He was my coach at Rajasthan. He helped my game a lot, especially in that first season that I played. I remember starting off the competition as I was and leaving competition just a way better bowler than when I got there. And it was probably because for the first half I didn't play much, but I was always in the nets with him, and he was always pushing me, man. Like he, never really let me slack off much. If he felt like I was overcomplicating things, he'd pull my head in. He always wanted me to be really proud of my performances. Like not so much hard on myself, because I think that was more Deepak Patel early on. But he's just wanted me to be proud of my performances, and if I was satisfied, then he wasn't happy. Which I think is a really cool thing. But he was also really compassionate, and I don't know if you've had much to do with him, but I really, really enjoyed working with Sai, and now I've had this chance to be a spin consultant at Rajasthan, and he's the head spin coach, and I'm kind of his disciple as well. So it's a great chance for me to continue my own development as a cricketer, but also be able to kind of rub shoulders with him and help other people improve in their cricket.
Yeah, you mentioned there about before all this COVID stuff happened, you're going to go over as spin consultant for the Rajasthan. Like, what was the thought process there? Was it about getting yourself ready for post cricket and a bit of personal development, or was some of it just being in the IPL and still working on your bowling, and also, I guess, just being in the shop window in case there was an injury or anything like that?
Oh, no, I suppose it's a combination of those things. I remember speaking to the Rajasthan Rules, franchise about 2 months or 3 months before the next IPL auction. I was told I wasn't required as a player that year, which was fine. They had a few young leg spinners coming through, and I only played one or two games a season before, so I understood that completely. But they said to me, if you go into the auction and you don't get picked, how about this role? And it wasn't something that I had gone and sought after. I'd been really honest and open with them, saying that in the long run, obviously I'd love to be a spin bowling coach or consultant, but I didn't realize it would happen this soon. But if I was to get picked, they gave me the flexibility that I'd go and play for whichever team. They'd support that 100%. But also, if I didn't get picked, they'd want me to continue on with the Royals. And I just love the environment. I really, really enjoy the franchise. I really enjoy the young fellas there. There's a couple of spin bowlers there that are just immensely talented, and it's also a chance to be part of the biggest T20 tournament in the world for a third consecutive year in the same franchise. Try to make a difference to help ultimately win a title, but also have the facilities there and the coaches and the just the entire process around the IPL to help improve my game as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out from that is, I guess, that you've already spoken about people you resonate with is people who are a good bloke, and I guess for them to ask you to do that, you would have made a good impression. So I think it's never underestimating that, and the opportunities that it can lead to is probably really important. I think the other thing is, like, I guess, like you said, they offered it to you, so you didn't go out and seek it. But I think that recorded an interview of Jeetan Patel yesterday, and he spoke about he went and net bowled at England for 6 weeks after he finished with Warwickshire, and I think spinners who kind of seem to improve quicker than others are people who go out and seek those opportunities that other people maybe don't quite do. So I think there's some really good lessons to be learned from that.
Just got to get out of your comfort zone, I reckon. One of the best decisions I ever made, and I'm a real big homebody, was moving from my association in Auckland to moving to Northern Districts. And at the time, it was such a hard thing for me to do, completely out of my comfort zone. But now when I look back at that, if I hadn't made that decision, I don't know where my life could have been. I could have been in a better position and played more games for New Zealand, or I might be at university, or I could have got a job or something. I don't really know, but yeah, I think it's just that willingness to get out of your comfort zone. And I suppose I'm in a position, at the moment where COVID's just such a out of my comfort zone thing that I'm really looking forward to getting back and playing cricket, because nothing's better than being able to play.
Definitely. What motivated you to move to Northern Districts? Was it purely to get more playing opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. Auckland at the time had two gun spinners that had been playing for them for years, and pretty much got told at the start of the season there was a really low chance of me playing in the first team. I think at that time it was a little bit of a financial thing for me as well. Like, I'd been out of school for 2 years, and I was pretty much leeching off mum and dad, who that, I suppose it was a period for them that was quite tough financially as well. And there was this big 6'2", 6'3" kid to feed, and I was a lot bigger then than I am now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I almost had to go and fend for myself a little bit. So getting out of my comfort zone was really important from more perspectives than just one.
Definitely. And then spoken a little bit about different T20 leagues, like moving on to more, I guess, like how you bowl. Starting with T20, like how in the different leagues you've played in, so like said Big Bash, IPL, played in the Caribbean Premier League, like is there much difference in how you go about things in the different leagues in different conditions? Obviously the T20 Blast as well. Imagine having Trent Bridge as your home ground was pretty tough as a spinner.
Wow, was it what? Yeah, look, I think the beauty of being able to play in all these different leagues, especially when you're playing international cricket or you're on the fringes of your international setup, then you get a chance to experience these conditions before you might get a chance to go and play international cricket there. So it's really important to get cues on how to bowl in different conditions. Like, for example, like me and Mitchell Santner work really well together as a pairing, and he generally bowls in the power play most of the time, and I bowl kind of through the middle. So, we discuss, say, for example, if we're in India, majority of the time, side spins a little bit more in India than it does in New Zealand. In New Zealand, and probably in England, you probably know, side spinners generally are your slider and they go straight. Where overspin works in our conditions slightly more. So in the Big Bash, the wickets are quite similar to New Zealand. So we find that overspin works. In the Caribbean, we find, the wickets may vary, but for the majority of the time, places like Guyana, Kingston, these places work with side spin. So, the best bowlers in the world adapt to those conditions as quickly as possible. And I think Warne always spoke about that. In his first 1 or 2 overs, he was always finding the right ball for those conditions, the ball that spun the most. And if you're trying to spin the ball as hard as you can, and have that point of difference as a spin bowler, you want to be able to spin the ball, and finding the ball that spins the most in all those conditions, I think, is the most important thing to be competitive.
Definitely. You spoke about earlier about bowling into the deck as kind of your style. Do you think that's something you really concentrate on? Say like this, just for example, this winter being New Zealand, I watched a little bit of the T20 series against India, and watching you bowl at Eden Park, like obviously a really hard place to bowl as a spinner with it being so short straight. Was that really like you went to the extreme of trying to bowl into the pitch at a ground like that?
Yeah, look, I think Eden Park's an anomaly. The boundary over your head is it feels like it's 45 meters, and the boundary square slightly longer. So you probably have to work for your boundaries a little bit more square. And because the boundaries are so short straight, the batter's set up to hit straight as well. So if you do keep them on the back foot, it's almost a little bit harder to hit boundaries or hit sixes. So again, it's working out how the conditions work. For each ground. And I found in that series it was quite tough because I couldn't quite get the ball over the top as what I would have liked, and it was something that I struggled with most of the season. So I had to actually bowl a lot more side spinners just to be able to have the control that I could in those conditions, because I just felt technically there was something that wasn't allowing me to do it. So in saying, it was a struggle, I'm actually quite proud of myself for getting through that series, how I did, because, mate, technically I felt, like I couldn't get the ball
Yeah.
coming out over the top or bowling it into the deck. And, the biggest lesson for me through that series is what we talked about, like what Warnie said, it's not going to feel the best all the time.
Yeah.
I had this run of like 4 or 5 months where, it just didn't feel right for me. And, that was the first series that I probably accepted it and accepted the way that I was bowling and had to do something about it. And I did, and had a couple of pretty decent performances. Unfortunately, we couldn't win the series. We actually lost at 5-0 with a couple of super overs that seem to plague New Zealand cricket at the moment. But so that was quite a good learning.
And then, like for other formats, like to say, for example, 50 over cricket. For listeners who don't know, the big difference between 50 over and T20 cricket is you have to have an extra man in the fielding ring. Is there like kind of a template guy that you like to have up, or is it all depend on your analysis on the batters? Like, how do you kind of work around that?
It does a little bit poisy, but I don't know what you think about it, but I find that middle phase of one-day cricket one of the most challenging periods to bowl in all formats of cricket now. I don't know if you're the same.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is like, that in the last 10 over period when you have 5 out, it just feels like it's a lot simpler. But I guess you're always thinking about defending a part of the ground. So say good one day wicket where it's not really spinning, I'll actually be a bit unorthodox in my man up. So to a right hander, I have mid off up, because I think because of my drift, that's generally, unless someone's really good over extra that I've watched on the footage, that's almost the easier one to defend. So that would be my template for a right hander. And then also with that, obviously you can bowl more googlies, just try and bowl really straight. But I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I remember speaking to Adam Zampo about it a little bit as well. And there were periods where he was bowling with his 2 straight men up and, 3 guys out on the leg side. And I was like, what's he doing here? But he's trying to find innovative ways to be successful because in this kind of day and age with the rules that we have with the 4 guys inside the ring, there's always an option for the batter to hit a boundary, whether you bring the offside up, he can hit you inside out over cover, he can back away and cut you or drive you through the offside. Or if you keep a guy up on the leg side, well, sometimes on good wickets, if you have mid on up, which, is the ideal scenario for a leg spinner to try to make him hit over the top against the turn. And sometimes the wickets these days are so good. And if you slightly over pitch, eight times out of 10, the ball generally goes over that guy. The bats are too good now. So you have to be a little bit defensive in your thinking. And sometimes I think it's really simple for me. If I just have my 2 straight guys back and 1 guy either side,
I like that
as a sweeper, and then just try to bowl at the stumps, spin it either way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's where, like you said, 50 over cricket's hard, but I think that's its little niche in being like quite interesting. Is all those little battles that I think for batters and bowlers, like that's probably where you have to be most skillful and have different. Obviously, it's not like 4-day cricket, 5-day cricket where you have to do it for a long period of time, but you have to be able to be like a really well-rounded player. I think probably especially for batters actually. Like
yeah.
So moving on to red ball, what's your approach in, you've obviously played quite a lot of test cricket and had some success, what's your approach for the longest form?
I guess the longest form for me is still a huge work in progress, like I think I started off playing test cricket for New Zealand when I'd only played 10 first class games. And, probably looking back, I don't think I was, the bowler that I wanted to be when I got a chance to play test cricket. Although at the time, you're 20 years old and you get a chance to play for your country. It's the best thing in the world. But I think the skills that I've learned that we speak about, especially in conditions like New Zealand, being a little bit more orthodox and being almost stubborn with the feel that you want with your captain and your coaches and things like that, I think has really helped me become a far better first class bowler. And hopefully I can get a chance to transfer those skills into the red ball. I definitely don't feel like I've taken the opportunities as best as I could have when I got the chance to play test cricket, especially in the past, 2 years at least. But 18 tests over 7 years, that's a big gap in between test matches, and it's definitely a huge goal of mine to win test matches or help win test matches for New Zealand on day 4 and 5. But it definitely comes with time. But I also think that if you do get to a stage where you're able to do that, I think if you're winning test matches on day 4 and 5 for your country, I think it's easy to transfer those skills into one day in T20 cricket, as opposed to if you're only bowling in T20 cricket, only bowling in white ball cricket and having a bit of success, I think the skills required to be really successful in test cricket are far greater than those two, if I'm being completely honest. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment, and figuring out during this COVID process what I want my cricket to look like over the next wee period. But I want to play test cricket, and I want to be able to contribute to wins for New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that what you said about it being the hardest and the skills being most transferable, like that's something I definitely do. Like I'd say if we're not having like a team practice and we're doing a certain format, like I'll always bowl red ball, because I know that if my red ball skills are on, all my other skills are going to be fine. Like because you have that control and that mastery of your stock ball.
Yeah, man, 100%. But also, like, I think it's easy in this day and age to get caught up in this T20 and white ball stuff. Like, it is the most fun cricket. Playing T20 cricket 3.5 hours. I love it. Like, getting a chance to play in these different leagues with all these, great players around the world and mixing and mingling with them. But, I just take it back to kind of when I was 14, 15 years old. Like, T20 cricket was just starting out, but I always wanted to be a test cricketer. And I got a chance to do it from a really young age, and probably didn't have the skill that I feel like I needed to have to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And I guess while I'm still young at 27 years old, if I gave up on that dream of, still wanting to be a test cricketer, I think I'd be doing, the 14-year-old me a bit of a disservice. So, I guess the more that you do learn about yourself and about bowling and about cricket, you do realise, and like you're saying, if your skills are, top notch in red ball cricket, then your skills can easily be transferred to the T20 setup.
Yeah, I love that chat about like doing like the however 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old version of you proud. Like I think that's something that resonates massively with me and like massive motivator. But talking, well, I guess red ball, but all formats. Like what are your variations and like rough, obviously hard to do over audio, I guess, but roughly like what do you change when you bowl them in terms of technically, and will you bowl more or less of a particular ball for a different format?
Well, I'd like to say I've got 15 variations. It's pretty cool to say things like that, but if I really think about it and I'm really honest with myself, I probably got a leg spinner, a slider, and a wrong'un. But the biggest variation that I've found is learning to bowl my leg spinner scrambled seam. I think that's helped me be pretty. I guess it helps me deceive people with my wrong'un a little bit more. If you're always bowling the ball seam up and you present the seam all the time, and then you bowl your wrong'un scrambled seam, and then you bowl the odd leggy scrambled seam, you get a lot of players playing for a wrong'un that's a leggy. I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. Simple variations. I'd love to work on a flipper, constantly working on the flipper like we spoke about earlier. But really simple. I think for a wrong'un, a great piece of advice I got given was, a lot of young leg spinners get told, to bowl your wrong'un, you've got to drop your front shoulder to be open a little bit to be able to bowl it. But the best piece of advice I got was not to open your shoulder, but to open your hips up. Slightly. So you're still keeping your front arm engaged and all your power is still going forward. And I found that I could bowl my wrong'un a little bit more pace when I did that, as opposed to if I drop my front shoulder, then I'm only bowling it with my bowling shoulder, which generally made it loop a bit. So that's the main difference that I make when I try to bowl my wrong'un, if all things are working well for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've just taken some notes down here as well, like I said, for my own game. But I think that scrambled seam thing is really interesting, and that's something I definitely don't do because I feel like when I bowl on the seam, I have that nice drift. Like I always think, I've got to do that. But actually, like if I go scrambled seam, like it does make all your variations better. So, like spoke about a little bit of Test cricket that you played. Like I think that's the first time I saw you bowl was in a series in the West Indies. I think Brendan McCullum was captain of that New Zealand side. What was it like playing under Brendan? And what are qualities of some of the best captains that you've played under when it comes to captaining spinners?
Yeah, Baz always used me as an attacking weapon. And the same, I think Kane always uses me as an attacking weapon, and they keep kind of honing in that you're an attacking bowler, which is great because that's kind of resonates with me as a character as well as my skill. But going back to those early days with Brendan, he was a great leader to be, in a changing room with. I remember my first Test match. He came in, knocked on the door, came to the room. I was sitting on the bed, nervous as shit, and he went into my minibar, grabbed a couple of beers that I had to pay for, and he cracked them open and gave me one and said, "Mate, congratulations on making the team. You're gonna have a great time. You probably won't remember anything of your debut and stuff, but really try to enjoy it." And it's real cool just to have that kind of confidence given to you from the captain, also like normalizing the whole situation, which was great. And in those early days, I think was really fortunate to be part of that West Indies series because it was the first time I think we had beaten them in a series over there in something like 40 years or 42 years or something like that. So to be able to do that in your second series, and I contributed to one of the wins in Kingston. Man, that was like right up there with even now one of my fondest cricketing memories.
Nice. I think talking about like speaking to Warne's highlight of my career, like, I think also playing with Brendan McCullum at Warwickshire was an awesome experience. I think his approach to the game, and like you said, that almost just chilled. I'll just have a beer and talk about it like that. You can learn a lot from that. So thanks a lot, Ish. This has been amazing, mate. I won't keep you for too much longer. So last question that I've been asking guests is, about giving advice to young spinners. So what I would like is one bit of on-field and one off-field bit of advice to any spinners, young or old, out there.
Um, On field, I think, especially with spin bowling, one of the best pieces of advice I've been given is don't be afraid to express your skills. A big thing is, like, in the nets, it's so easy to let yourself go and rip the ball as hard as you can because there's no consequences. And I think sometimes, especially in game, you're so in fear of making a mistake, you probably don't let yourself go as much. Be really free and loose and trust your bowling and trust that all the work that you've done is going to work. But it's definitely that. Don't be afraid to express your skills and let yourself go.
Love that.
And off field, advice off field is don't drink too many beers. They only get you into trouble.
There you go. Very solid advice.
Yeah.
Very solid advice. Right. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Ish. That's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, man. Legend. I really, really appreciate it, bro. I love talking leg spin with a fellow leggy.
Legend. Go well, mate.